technique tutorial. My name is Samantha Wiltshire and I'll be your tutor for today. And today we're going to be learning about using curves for construction. Today we'll be going through lesson objectives, our equipment for our activity. We'll be understanding curvilinear approaches to construction, and we'll be using those simple curvilinear shapes to build an image of our own. And then we'll be concluding and going through our references and further activities. All right, our goals for today are to see in new ways as artists using a curvilinear approach. So we want to see big, chunky, oval and circle and elliptical shaped areas. We want to try and achieve a likeness by simplifying forms in this way. And we want to understand better how we can begin an artwork. And on the right of this slide, you'll see that I have some drawings by the artist Peter Mackey, who's also a tutor here at SAS. And he's an artist who oftentimes uses curved lines and very expressive and gestural curved lines as well to try and describe the forms of the bodies that he's drawing. So today you'll need a simple reference image of your choice or a printout of the owl featured later in these slides if you'd like to follow along with me. You'll need an HB pencil. You'll need any drawing material, which will show up on your printed reference image. I use soft pastel in this demonstration, but you could also use chalk or marker. You'll want a hard and a soft eraser, some drawing paper, and it can just be basic drawing paper. We're not going to follow this through to become a finished rendered drawing today. It's just a practice construction. And you might also like to have with you a skewer, ruler, piece of string, or a knitting needle if you would like to apply any comparative measuring processes and try and create more accuracy. So first of all, what is a curvilinear approach to construction? By curvilinear, we mean using circles, ovals, ellipses, and just curvy lines and shapes generally to understand form in a simple way. And we can combine this with other measuring and kind of ways of seeing techniques to improve our accuracy. You'll see here that I have an example from Lance Richland's Drawing Made Easy, Lifelike Heads, where they've broken down an entire human face into these curvy forms. All right, so now we're going to practice using this curvilinear approach to construction. To begin with, screenshot and print this slide to follow along with me using this owl, or get ready your own reference picture at home. And you might choose to use a messy and loose approach for a more expressive result. Or if you'd like to, you can take more of a controlled approach, as I will be in this demo, and that will get you a tidier result. And in this exercise, we will not be focusing on measuring techniques. You may integrate measuring, however, if you wish, if that's something which you've learned from other videos in our series or maybe from your classroom tutor. And our first step is going to be to find the base shapes. So using any drawing tool that's visible, mark the big shapes on your reference image. You'll see that I've done that digitally here with just a highlighter tool. So you're going to approach that in a really similar way. And I've used my blue highlighter to indicate the big shapes that you should start with, and then a green highlighter to indicate the next level of detail that you'll want to include. So you're going to map these larger shapes in first on your reference, and then you can go ahead and replicate this result with pencil on your paper. Then you're going to go into those green shapes I've indicated, which are still important details, but slightly smaller details. And those will be what we'll map in both on our reference picture and on our page next. And again, you can integrate measuring if you wish at this point for accuracy. Right, so in the last video, we learned how to construct this owl using very angular lines, using very sharp edges. We made him look like a little robot owl using that simple geometry. Today, we're going to be taking a different approach, and we're going to be using our really curvy forms, all of our curvilinear circles and ellipses and kind of other types of curved shapes as well. And we're going to be doing this because it makes construction very fast. And also because if you have a more gestural style, having everything feel very angular and boxy might not be for you. Now, today we're not going to be going into detail about measuring proportion or about any of those other methods of seeing, because we'll be exploring those in other videos. So make sure to check out the rest of our construction videos in the series to add to this skill set. You will see me using my skewer to do a little bit of measuring here and there. You'll see that fast forwarded today. You can use some comparative measuring as well to check your proportions if you feel that you're ready to do that, or you can leave that for another lesson if you'd prefer and just use your sight to correct and to see whether your proportions are correct. In particular, you're going to want to flick your eyes back and forth rapidly to spot the difference between your owl and the picture. And you also might like to actually flip your reference picture and your drawing upside down to force your brain to stop seeing this owl as an owl and to force it to really just see it as these shapes that you've mapped out. So you're going to grab something that you can mark on the darker image. I've got a red soft pastel here, but you can use anything at all at home. In fact, something which doesn't smudge like a soft pastel might be preferable to keep everything nice and tidy. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is to decide what shapes I'll begin with. And in my case, I think I'm going to start big and work into small, which is hopefully what you'll be doing most of the time. I'm going to start by thinking about this kind of egg shape. Here's an egg. And then I can think within that egg about this shape on top of his head. Then I might also like to think about these two curvy areas right here. That's going to be my starting point. All right, so when you're wanting to draw anything which has curvy shapes, it's a really great idea, first of all, if you've never done this before, to get really confident drawing curvy shapes. And when I do this, I kind of think of myself as being a ballerina. I'm trying to do pirouettes. I really want to think about a central point that I can look at. So when ballerinas do pirouettes, they look at one thing and they keep their concentration on that one thing. Here I'm going to pick a little zone for my pinky to live. That's going to be where I will concentrate. And then I'm going to keep that pinky in that general area as a guide. And I can get a nice tidy circle. If I wanted to draw an ellipse, that pinky is going to go up and down instead, or side to side if I wanted to create an ellipse which is nice and flat like a pancake. So you could even do a whole page of these if you wanted to get yourself familiar and confident with the process. All right, so now I've had a practice. I want to come in and create my nice big kind of egg shape. I think it's a little bit larger on that side. And you'll notice I go over and over and over this shape. It's because it's really hard to get any sort of a curvy shape correct the very first time that you do it. You'll probably need to go over a few times as well, or to stop and correct, or maybe try multiple times. I do my constructions quite dark in these videos because I want you to be able to see it really well on camera. But I would recommend that, especially if you're doing a few lines to find your shape, you are going to want to do it much lighter than me, and try and do it in as few lines as you can wherever possible. That will stop the pigment building up in your paper and making little messy spots that are hard to erase on your drawing, because we really don't want that later on when it's time for us to do some tonal work. We don't want a beautiful bright highlight to be tainted by kind of yucky smudges underneath. All right, I have my approximate head and body shape now, and I can adjust that if I feel that I need to. And now I want to come in and I want to find these lovely curvy shapes that I made for the wings. And if I see a mistake as I go, I'm going to adjust it. So I'm using the motion of my wrist as well to get curves where I would like them to be nice and smooth. And this is going to be all actually a little bit too smooth when I'm done. I'm going to find that I'll need to come back in and to sometimes make these curves, you know, kind of push out in one direction where maybe there's a feather sticking out, or if it's particularly uneven in a particular area, I might need to come and adjust that as well. So there's my first curvy shapes of my owl. I'm going to take a minute now and check mine, make sure that I'm happy with mine, look back and forth and measure. You might like to take a minute to do the same if you feel that you can see something which is also off in yours. The next step is to make corrections and explore the detail. So as you add small details, remember to still simplify. For example, breaking feathers down into sections or clumps. You'll see here that I've used lots of oval and elliptical shapes to indicate these clumps of feathers, which I can tell are there because of the shadows that I can see on the wing. At this point in time, you can also flick your eyes back and forth to spot the difference and see if there's any corrections which you might need to make. And you can continue to use comparative measuring if that's something you're doing as well today. And you'll also at the very end, whether you're measuring or not, want to erase those markings on your reference picture or grab a fresh reference picture which you haven't marked up so that you can spot any missing details which might have actually been covered by your construction lines. All right, so now I'm fairly happy with the curvy shapes that I've got down. I'm going to take a minute to clean up any extra lines that I don't need because I don't want any line spaghetti getting a bit confusing. And then I'm going to find the next set of biggest curvy shapes that I'm going to want to put in. All right, and as I'm rubbing them out, I can also see some areas where maybe something went awry. For example, I had flattened the top of the head a little bit. So I'm going to come in and adjust that as I see it. I can also see that this is going to bulge out quite a lot more here. All right, so I can now see two curved lines that are going to come in like this. I can create the curve of the beak, and I could see the curvy eye sockets. So I'm going to come in and create those as well. And I'm paying attention to the shape. These aren't just curvy lines, they're curvy lines that form a loose triangle shape. And so I still want to keep in mind that approximate triangle shape as I go, what amount of space should be in here and what should that space look like? All right, so I noticed that my gap here where the second eye sits was way, way, way too big. What happened there was that my owl is in a 3/4 view, so I can see 3/4 of the face. And something which is really, really easy to do is to accidentally straighten the face because our brains, they really like faces to be looking at us. That's super easy to do. Double check that you haven't done that as well. So we could think about our negative and our positive space. We can treat the beak as our positive space. We can treat the little bit of eye showing here as our negative space. And we can think to ourselves about how much of that we should be seeing. what I'm doing now is I'm continuing to go in and correct anywhere where I think the detail might be slightly off, anywhere where I think the shape might be off. I'm also cleaning up, if I need to, any of my construction lines on the image itself to make sure that I'm also happy with those shapes. I can see, for example, that there's going to be a bit more of a bulge right here. And I can't really see that very well unless I'm looking quite closely at my image, and unless, of course, I come in and erase back a little bit so I can see more clearly what's happening in that area. Maybe I draw a new line to help me think about the curve that occurs in that particular section. I can come in and I can map the eyes. I'm going to come in and do some more tidying up of my lines. Pulling back lines I don't need anymore, so that I have the opportunity to find lines that I do. I'm finding that pastel a bit clunky now to mark in big shapes. So I might be able to come in with maybe a pen instead. So making sure for this stage that you're using a material that isn't going to actually block off information that you might need to be able to complete your drawing. I might be able to put in some detail if I can see it. I'm using sight for this bit, but remember that you can also break this down as well into curvy shapes, just like this. 1, 2. I can see number 3 there. I can see another curve there and another curve right here. Helps me to create the pattern of what the feathers are going to be doing. That'll help me find those shadows later on. And now I'm into the small details. So in some instances, I may be able to go ahead and pop them in by sight without also mapping it on the image itself. But I can always come back and do that again if I start to feel that I need to. So you could keep going in this same fashion until you have all of your owls detail. I'm not today, I'm going to leave it here as a construction. If you wanted to at home though, you could go further and you could start to do more shadow shaping, mapping in of other small details that you might be able to see. You could come in and do more measuring. I know that for sure on this artwork, I could have perhaps done some more measuring, double checking these relationships, making sure that it's proportionally accurate. It just depends on your style, whether you're happy with it being a bit more of an expressive owl or whether you would really like your owl to be exactly accurate. How much that matters to you is going to affect how much measuring you're going to need to do to achieve that particular result. If you are looking for accuracy as well, finding these curves, I'm doing it in a natural way, which is quite intuitive, but there are ways that we can use our sharp lines, for example, diagonal lines, as a guide to get not just any curve, but the exact sort of curve that it is that we're looking for. And if I find, for example, when I'm clarifying this drawing and I'm finishing it up, that my curve is not exactly right, I know that I can come in and I can go, okay, that's not the right curve. Let me break that down into harsher lines like so. Now I can come in and I can round that off into a curve. Same within the eye, my curve was not quite right. So I know that to resolve that, I can always come in and use some of those tools that came from the harsh geometry construction video. And I can come and I can think, well, okay, it's not working right now in the way that I had approached it. But what if I do think about that as being a harsh trapezium shape rather than curves? I can definitely splice these methods together. In the same respect, for my very harsh construction where he looked like a robot, sometimes that can come across too harsh and you can lose some of the bird's character. So I might need to come in and freehand go and make sure that I'm happy with how those curves feel. And at the end of these processes, it's also really important that you either come in and erase all of these construction lines or get a fresh version of your image which doesn't have any construction lines at all, because that's going to allow you to see anything that those basic lines might have been covering up, which could affect your final feeling of your drawing. For example, I can see already that there's a tuft of feathers that's going to come out more prominently right there, which was hidden by my initial construction lines. I can also see a tuft of feathers right here that I might want to place in. And I can see that there's a separation between this tuft of feathers here and this small section right in here. So I can start to really clarify what's happening. And there you have it. There's your initial construction of an owl that you can go and turn into a beautiful finished drawing. So you'll see here a picture of the finished product that we'll end up with today. But my finished product is the bare bones construction. And there are still more ways that I could have sat with this and made corrections as well. So I wonder if you can please spot the difference here to practice for me and see if there's any mistakes you can notice. If you spot one, feel free to let me know when you see me in the studio, or maybe pop it down in the comments below. And for some further practice, I would definitely recommend drawing freehand curves, circles, ovals, and ellipses on a page to improve your level of control. I would also recommend practicing this exercise of seeing the curvilinear forms to begin with. So that could mean printing out a variety of images and just practicing drawing those shapes on top of the printouts, even if you don't produce them as finished drawings. And then pick one or two that you really like that you're going to follow through with and see through to the end as completed drawings, or at the very least completed detailed constructions rather than just basic constructions. And here are our image and academic references today, if you'd like to do some further reading or follow up. And our long-term goal for this skill set is to confidently create freehand curves and break down complex subjects into simple curvilinear forms. We also want to decide which construction method works best for our personal practices. So make sure to go ahead and watch the rest of our construction videos on YouTube so that you get a full idea of the different options which are available to you. Thank you so much for your time today, and as always, happy art making.